I got Steve Dace on the line, Michigan podcast, talking Jim Delaney, also talking Michigan football. So you go to camp here in the next 7 to 10 days. You know, what are you looking for? Is there any way to decipher what happens on the field, translate that, interpret that to make you feel one way or the other once the spring games played?
Well, I think the story of the offseason for Michigan, you know, you lose some guys on defense, nowhere near the losses that they had 2 years ago when they were replacing 10 guys that had started most of the year.
Yep.
And that defense, you know, that defense finished top 3 in the country with no help from the offense all year. If you go back since 2011, Michigan has finished lower than 16th nationally in total defense one time. And they've had 3 different defensive coordinators since then. So given the level they recruit at and the quality of coaching they have, you can put Michigan down right now, sight unseen, for a top 15, top 20 defense, worst case scenario. So the question here is really about the offensive approach. And, you know, what we talked about last offseason is we saw Harbaugh make decisions that a lot of people thought he would never make. You know, getting rid of the offensive line coach that had been with him forever. And, you know, Ed Warner was a huge upgrade at that position. And you saw an offensive line that was one of the worst in the Power 5 in 2017 become one of the best in the Big Ten. I don't think it was a vintage, you know, Michigan offensive line, but it went from holding the program back to holding its own in 1 year. And I think Ed Warner had a lot to do with that. You know, so you saw him make a move right away, and you saw him go out and get his quarterback in Shea Patterson. And now what happened this past year is when you look at the way we recruit and the weapons we had on offense, the fact Wisconsin threw more passes than we did with all the problems it had at its quarterback spot. You know, you really saw in the Ohio State game that, you know, the combine this week, we saw 3 Ohio State receivers run 4.41 or lower. And we're out there playing man-to-man defense against all those guys. No one in America is covering those guys man-to-man, okay? So, yeah, we could have had a better pass rush, and maybe if we had a better pass rush in that game, hell, maybe you'd have hold them to hell of the 40, all right? We needed an offense that could score more points. And if we're going to play a man-to-man kind of a defense, it's a good news and bad news situation. The good news is it makes you less prone to upsets from lesser talented teams because you're overwhelming them athletically. They can't score enough points. On the other hand, when you go up against teams that recruit as well or better than you on that side of the ball, you can't win enough of those matchups. And so you better have – now, the good news for Michigan fans, it's only about 20% of the teams in this sport, if less. The bad news is those are the teams we need to beat to actually be the program we're paying Harbaugh to be. All right? So, to me, this is really about then if our defensive approach is going to be smother teams when we can overwhelm them athletically, then when we go up against teams that can take advantage of man-to-man matchups, if our guys don't get home, we better be in a position where we can, if we need to score 21, 28 points in a half, we better be able to do it. You know, go back to what Michigan did against Alabama in that Orange Bowl 20 years ago with Tom Brady, where they realized we're not running the ball against these guys. And so basically Brady threw the ball every down for the second half, okay? When you go watch that Ohio State film and you know, people forget it was a game at the half. Michigan scored right before the half, had that crazy turnover, scored again. And then to start the second half, I think, what were we down by 6, I think, at the half. And then we got a stop on defense and got the ball back and went 3 and out. 2 runs off tackle, nothing, 3rd and long sack, bam. We can't have an offense, Mark, where we are running on 3rd and 8. The quarterback is turning his back to the line of scrimmage to run a play-action pass. We can't do that crap, okay? We need a quicker, more of a college situational, flexible offense. So what I think is the story to watch for Michigan in the spring, you know, is the hiring of Josh Gaddis. And Gaddis has been adamant, and he's been even said this on Harbaugh's podcast with Harbaugh. This is his offense. He's calling the plays. It's his system. And so this is sort of the last piece of Jim's evolution here. You know, I mean, in the 4 years he's been here, we have the 7th best record in college football. And I think the day that he was hired, most fans and pundits would have said, "Wow, he's done a really good job." It's just how he's obtained that probably didn't happen the way most people thought. So the perception is, you know, still kind of mixed right now because of his inability to beat Ohio State. So I think that this is now about, maybe Jim is evolving to more of a college CEO style of coach. You know, a lot of times what you see in the NFL is if a guy comes from the offense or defense, he really has his hand on that side of the ball, and the coordinator on the other side of the ball is kind of the co-coach, you know? And that's kind of how this has worked with Jim so far is, you know, first it was DJ Durkin, then Don Brown, and those guys essentially were the head coaches of the defense, and Jim had his hands in the offense. I think maybe you're going to see more of an evolution now to more of the college CEO style of coach that a Nick Saban, an Urban Meyer was, et cetera. And I think the hiring of Josh Gaddis is significant in that Harbaugh recognizes that we have to be more of a college program coached by NFL guys than NFL guys coaching a college program. And I think that's the story to watch throughout the spring.
Now, as soon as you outlined the 3rd and 8 play action, I had horrible flashbacks to Earl Bruce insisting that Mike Tomczak and his other quarterbacks would run the play action on whether it was 3rd and 18 even. And not only the play action, but the blindside play action where they would fake to their offhand to the left side and have to turn their back to the defense and the pass rush completely before setting up in the pocket. Anyway, so I've always been a critic of the statement, perception is reality. I understand it, that the perception becomes the reality to those people that wrongly perceive the situation. I get what the statement means. I've always hated it, and I think we see it played out in our news media and in our social media every day. When it comes to Michigan football, if you ask the average college football fan who's fairly astute, they still have negative connotations about the job that Jim Harbaugh is doing, even when this team dominated 8 out of 9 Big Ten games and lost by 1 score on the road to a team that made the college football playoff. The Florida game, I don't think we can take a whole lot from it. I give them all the credit. They earned the victory based on the players on the field. I don't take a whole lot from that game. I know that you were upset, and rightfully so, because of the lack of management concerning some situations on the field. But this is a better team than it was that we were addressing coming out of 8-5 in 2017. There's no question about that.
There's not. I think that it really just comes down to this. Jim Harbaugh has done everything the University of Michigan hoped he would do when he took over, except the most important thing for him to do. I mean, if there was a list of 10 things there, he's done 9. I mean, here, you know, from 2004 to 2014, Michigan was in the AP polls top 10 a total of 21 weeks. Since Harbaugh has taken over, they've been in the AP poll a total of 29 weeks, Mark. I mean, there's no question. You know, you look at you look at the NFL scouting combine this year, and what you watch today with, you know, David Long. I mean, Deion Sanders said he was the only defensive back in the drill that actually ran the drill the right way. I mean, Chase Winovich was a 3-star prospect that had no position, and in Brady Hoke's last class, you know, they developed him into a edge rusher that you know went out there yesterday and ran like a 4.59 40. Okay, I mean, he's done everything there is to do, except, and it's not even beating Ohio State. It's just that ultimately what he was brought here to do cannot be done without beating Ohio State. Yeah. Or at least it couldn't be done without beating Ohio State while Urban Meyer was there. We shall see what happens now. You know, I really think the next 5 to 10 years of Big Ten football history are going to be written by the number 12. And here's what I mean by that. If you look at the recent history of Ohio State football, really since Woody Hayes arrived on the scene, whoever they hire as a head coach is winning 73% of his games. That's the baseline, period. Just by showing up. Okay? The greatness is defined by what he does in the next 12% of those games, or better. Okay, like what you saw with Urban Meyer, for example. And if Ryan Day is a sentient being, he wins, and if he's the coach for the next 5 years, he wins 73 to 75% of his games just by showing up. The rest of the Big Ten's history will be written by how much better than that he can do. Mm-hmm. Because that's where the margin for where the championships in the league are going to be won. Okay? And that's been Jim's issue. He's won 75% of his games. The problem is the one he keeps losing is the one that's the the gate, to, if you will, to winning the next, not just that game, but the next 10% of games, Big Ten conference championships, etc. Yeah. So that's going to be what decides, ultimately not just Ryan Day's legacy, but the shape of things to come in the rest of the Big Ten as well.
Always enjoyed the conversation with Steve Day's Michigan podcast. Look him up here on YouTube and also your favorite audio platform. Steve, we appreciate you dropping by again. You were the first name that came to mind when I heard the news about Jim Delaney. We appreciate it.
Anytime, brother. Take care.